I had just started settling into my usual evening routine when the doorbell rang, 3 sharp chimes in quick succession. When I opened the door, I found myself face to face with Madison, Karen's 16-year-old daughter, clutching her phone like it was a life raft. Her expression carried the kind of smug entitlement that only comes from years of watching her mother terrorize every HOA meeting in sight. "I need your Wi-Fi password," she announced, skipping any form of greeting. Her phone screen glowed, showing a half-uploaded TikTok video frozen at 12%. "My mom grounded me from mobile data," she said with a huff. "I have followers waiting for my content. You have to give me your internet." For a second, I just blinked, trying to process the sheer audacity of the demand. "Excuse me?" "My Wi-Fi password," she repeated, slower this time, as though I was the one having trouble understanding. "I can see your network from my room. It's got full bars. I'll only use it a little to upload my videos." "Madison," I said, keeping my voice calm, "I'm not giving you my private Wi-Fi password." "That's not how this works." Her face twisted into a scowl I recognized. Instantly, it was the same expression her mother wore every time she didn't. "Get her way during HOA meetings. Are you serious right now? It's just the internet. It's not like it costs you extra." "It's my private connection that I pay for," I explained patiently. "You'll have to work things out with your parents about your phone privileges." Madison's eyes narrowed dangerously. "This is ridiculous. I'm calling the cops on you for being unreasonable." Then she spun on her heel and stomped across my lawn, shouting over her shoulder, "You're going to get arrested for this." I watched her march back toward the oversized colonial across the street, the one where Karen Peaton, our self-appointed HOA queen, ruled her cul-de-sac kingdom. Karen had been president of the HOA for 3 years now, treating community guidelines like royal decrees and neighbors like her subjects. And Madison? She was the perfect heir to that throne. Growing up under Karen's iron rule, watching her order around landscapers, postal workers, and even delivery drivers had molded Madison into a miniature tyrant. She believed the world owed her whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted it. This whole mess started because of her recent grounding. Karen had caught her sneaking out to meet friends late one night. The punishment: no social media, no data, no mercy. But Madison, with her growing TikTok following, thought her fame was more important than any parental punishment. For days, I'd seen her skulking around the neighborhood, waving her phone around like a divining rod, searching for Wi-Fi. She'd been spotted sitting in her car outside the community center after hours, trying to connect to their network. It was almost comical, until she showed up at my door again the next morning. This time, she looked even more determined, and somehow, even more annoyed. "Look," she said, crossing her arms, "I talked to my mom, and she agrees that you should share your Wi-Fi. It's basically a community service. Everyone deserves internet access." I almost laughed. "Madison, your mom doesn't get to decide how I use my private connection." "You're being selfish," she snapped, her tone rising to that particular teenage pitch that could probably shatter glass. "I have important content to post, and you're just hoarding bandwidth like some kind of internet miser." "I'm using the internet I pay for," I said evenly. "That's how utilities work." Her cheeks reddened. "This is discrimination. You can't just deny a resident their rights." I raised an eyebrow. "What rights exactly?" "The right to internet access," she declared, hands on her hips. "It's a basic human need." Before I could even respond to that creative take on constitutional law, she was already texting someone on her phone. Not long after, I heard the familiar sound of mail sliding into my box. When I checked, there it was, an official-looking HOA violation notice. The letter, printed on Karen's personal HOA letterhead, accused me of failing to demonstrate community spirit and refusing reasonable neighbor assistance. It even threatened a hearing if I didn't reconsider my stance on shared community resources. I had to give Karen credit. She worked fast. In less than 20 minutes, she'd somehow reclassified my private Wi-Fi as a community resource. By afternoon, another letter arrived. This one accused me of creating neighborhood discord and violating the spirit of cooperative living. I could practically hear Karen's smug tone in every line. Then, by evening, a third letter landed in my mailbox, this time warning of potential legal action if I continued to withhold services from fellow residents. Karen's imagination was clearly in overdrive. I dealt with her overreaches before, but this was something else entirely. She genuinely believed her daughter's lack of Wi-Fi qualified as a community crisis. The breaking point came the next morning. Madison was back at my door, phone in hand and eyes blazing with drama. "Last chance," she announced, already dialing. "Give me the password or I'm calling 911. I stared at her in disbelief. "You're going to call emergency services. Over Wi-Fi?" "You're withholding public utilities," she said, reciting the phrase like she'd memorized it from one of her mother's lectures. "That's probably illegal." "Madison," I sighed. "Wi-Fi isn't a public utility." "Yes, it is," she fired back. "The internet is like electricity or water now. Everyone needs it, so you have to share it." Before I could stop her, she actually pressed the call button. I stood there, torn between horror and fascination as she held the phone to her ear. Then I heard it, the dispatcher's calm voice. 911, what's your emergency?" Madison straightened, her tone suddenly serious. "Hi, my neighbor is withholding public utilities from me. He won't give me his Wi-Fi password, and I think that's against the law," Madison said into her phone, her voice trembling with teenage righteousness. There was a pause that stretched long enough to feel like eternity. Then came the dispatcher's voice, dry and measured. "Ma'am, is this a life-threatening emergency?" "Well, no," Madison admitted. "Are you currently without power, water, or gas service to your residence?" "No, but I need internet access for my social media," she said, frustration creeping back in. And he's being really unreasonable about it. I could practically hear the dispatcher's patience being tested. "Ma'am, private Wi-Fi networks are not public utilities," the voice said finally. "I'm going to have an officer speak with you about the appropriate use of emergency services." Madison's confident smirk faltered. "Wait, what?" 15 minutes later, a patrol car rolled up in front of my house. Out stepped Officer Rodriguez, wearing the expression of a man who knew he'd just pulled the weirdest call of his day. Before he even reached my porch, Madison rushed over to him. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she said breathlessly. "This man is refusing to share his internet with the community. That has to be illegal, right?" Officer Rodriguez looked from her to me, trying to piece the puzzle together. "Sir, could you explain what's going on?" I gave him a rundown of the past few days. Madison's repeated demands, Karen's barrage of HOA letters, and the now infamous Wi-Fi standoff. "So," he said slowly, turning back to Madison, "you called 911 because your neighbor wouldn't give you his Wi-Fi password?" Madison's confidence was melting by the second. "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds bad, but—" "Ma'am," Officer Rodriguez interrupted, "Wi-Fi is private property. It's not a public utility. Your neighbor isn't required by law to share his internet connection." That's when the air split with a sharp, familiar voice. "Officer, thank goodness you're here." Karen Peaton stormed across the street like a suburban general, her HOA badge pinned proudly to her blazer. "This man has been causing trouble in our community for weeks." Officer Rodriguez turned to her with the weary calm of someone who'd seen it all. "And you are?" "Karen Peaton, HOA president," she declared, as if the title carried legal authority. "This resident has been flagrantly violating our community obligations and refusing to cooperate with reasonable neighbor requests." "Ma'am," Rodriguez asked evenly, "what specific community obligations require someone to share their private Wi-Fi?" Karen hesitated for half a heartbeat, then powered through. "It's about community spirit. We all have to support each other. Hoarding resources is just selfish." "Mrs. Peaton," he said, his tone steady, "private internet service is not a community resource. Your neighbor is under no legal obligation to share his Wi-Fi password." Karen's face flushed red, her composure slipping. "But my daughter needs internet access. This is ridiculous." "What kind of neighborhood doesn't support its young people?" "The kind where people respect private property," I replied quietly. Karen snapped around, her temper boiling over. "Don't you dare talk to me about private property. I've been documenting your violations for days." She turned back to the officer. "You need to do something about this." Officer Rodriguez's patience was clearly thinning. "Ma'am, filing false reports is a misdemeanor. Your daughter called 911 claiming someone was withholding public utilities, which is factually incorrect." Madison went pale. "Wait, I could get in trouble for that?" "Yes, ma'am," the officer said firmly. "Misuse of emergency services is taken very seriously." Karen's eyes darted around, realizing the crowd was forming. "Now hold on, officer. My daughter was just confused about the technicalities. Surely we can work this out reasonably. Mrs. Peaton," he said, taking out his notepad, "I'm going to document this incident. If there are any further false reports or harassment about this Wi-Fi issue, charges will be filed." By now, several neighbors had gathered. Mrs. Chen from next door stood on her porch, phone raised and recording. Across the street, the Johnsons peeked through their curtains, trying not to laugh. Karen saw them watching, and her voice took on a desperate, performative edge. "This is all being blown out of proportion. We're just trying to resolve a simple community issue." "Ma'am," Officer Rodriguez replied flatly, "there is no community issue here. This is private property, and you have no authority to force anyone to share their internet." Madison looked stricken. Am I going to get arrested?" "Not today," he said evenly. "But I am issuing you a formal warning for misuse of emergency services. Any future false reports will result in charges." Karen's face cycled through shades of pink and red as the reality sank in. Her daughter could face charges. Her HOA badge carried zero legal weight, and half the neighborhood had witnessed her meltdown. "This is outrageous," she sputtered. "I'm going to file a complaint with your supervisor." "That's your right, ma'am," Officer Rodriguez replied calmly. "But the facts won't change. Wi-Fi is private property." He finished documenting the report, then got back into his patrol car and drove off, leaving Karen and Madison standing in the middle of their lawn, humiliated, defeated, and very, very quiet. But the story didn't end there. By that evening, Mrs. Chen's video of the confrontation was making the rounds in the neighborhood group chat. Within hours, everyone knew about Karen's attempt to force Wi-Fi sharing and her daughter's false 911 call. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Tom Harrison, the HOA vice president. "We need to talk about Karen," he said grimly. "The board's calling an emergency meeting." 3 days later, the HOA gathered for a special session. Karen arrived looking defiant, chin high, but the board members were already done with her. Tom opened the meeting with a motion to remove Karen from her position as president, citing abuse of authority and bringing public embarrassment to the community. "This is a witch hunt," Karen snapped. "I was just enforcing community standards." "Karen," said board member Sarah Williams, "you tried to force a resident to share his private internet. That's not enforcement. That's harassment." The vote was unanimous, effective immediately. Karen Peaton was removed as HOA president. Meanwhile, the community center banned Madison from using its facilities for 30 days for misusing emergency services. The once cocky teenager who'd claimed the internet is a basic human right now faced real consequences for her stunt. That night, I couldn't help but laugh as I updated my Wi-Fi network name to "No free TikToks here." Across the street, Karen's lights went out early. The former HOA queen, too embarrassed to face her neighbors, had lost everything that mattered to her: her position, her influence, and her carefully crafted reputation, all because she couldn't accept one simple truth. Some things just aren't hers to control.